Development and Community Engagement Committee meeting. And I just want to start by saying welcome back. It's been a while since we've been together. A lot has happened. And so I want to start by just reviewing our goals. So our meeting notice said goals because we do have them. And when things are not specifically referred to us, these are goals we'll keep coming back to and working through. So of the committee, I think you have a copy, and members of the public, if you want a copy of our goals, please reach out, let me know. My email is lstevenson@norwood-ohio.com. So our first goal is to create a welcome to Norwood experience. We've talked about having something tangible, something online, but just helps people know what to expect of Norwood, how to connect. We'll get more in detail about all of these, but just want to do a quick overview. Our second goal is about small business in Norwood. Really looking at how do we compile, create, and promote resources that residents or even business owners who aren't residents can utilize when generating revenue in our city. We talked specifically about looking at developers and filling in those vacancies on Montgomery Road. Our third goal has to do with something called neighborhood associations in Norwood. And at our last meeting, we agreed to table that goal and really kind of defer to how action groups might develop as a result of the quality of life planning process, which is another goal area that I'll talk about in a moment. And the fourth goal being community engagement in Norwood. So this was really us saying, hey, how about we try to increase transparency about development projects and really any upcoming changes. I think we've also used the committee to talk about upcoming events and activities that residents might enjoy. So we're going to keep doing that. And the last goal area is actually going to be our first agenda item tonight. And it's written as quality of life in Norwood. And it's really a reference to the quality of life vision planning process. And I know that the steering committee is working hard on developing a name, a brand, which we'll hear more about. But this is an effort that's been underway going back to at least January, probably further back. But the steering committee lead is here, Angela Pansella, who's been with us before. And with her also is Emma Shirey with the Community Building Institute, Long Day, who's also a partner on the project. So I'm going to ask the two of them to go ahead and start providing updates on what has happened since, I think the last time you were here, you were telling us about June 23rd coming up. So if you could provide us with updates, we'd love to hear them.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Working Together for Norwood's Future is the page that's in front of you, and that's a compilation of the visioning work that was done at that June 23rd meeting. So the beginning of the process, we organized a steering committee, Woven Oak, Norwood Community Coalition, Norwood First, Norwood Neighborhood Services, these formal and informal organizations in Norwood banded together to form a steering committee in the fall of 2017. We received technical support and resources from LISC and Interact for Health in this process. LISC connected us with the relational organizer Jim Caprero out of Chicago. He taught the 10 members of that steering committee about conducting interviews with formal and informal community leaders. We conducted some 69 interviews, I believe, asking people about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in Norwood. We then did a report back session on June 23rd, which was fairly well attended for a Saturday morning in June. It was about 65 people that came and heard from different speakers who were subject matter experts on the different themes that emerged out of those interviews. So the themes that emerged that people had the most to say about were infrastructure, city government, community perception, community engagement, housing, partnerships, economic development, and inclusion. So we are We then took all of those themes and the information that we got, and we had a visioning session where people were asked to imagine Norwood 10 years in the future. Imagine being at a celebration in the neighborhood where we were celebrating our accomplishments, and then imagine being a reporter at that celebration and ask the reporter journalist questions: who, what, where, when, why? What are we celebrating? Who put this accomplishment together? When did it happen? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? And the sticker that I handed out to folks is a reflection of the why answers that we got in that visioning session. So what people said was most important to them. We then crafted a vision statement out of that. That's on that Working Together for Norwood's Future page. The vision is: Norwood is a diverse and thriving community that provides spaces and activities to support and welcome all residents and encourage people to connect with their neighbors, maintains roads, parks, and other community assets through innovation and collaboration, and encourages entrepreneurs and the revitalization of the Montgomery Road corridor. On the back of that same page, there is a partial list of some of the ideas that were generated through that process. We will be discussing this and much more when we reconvene, and the public is welcome to attend. The public is highly encouraged to attend a series of action team meetings beginning Wednesday, August 29th. We'll be meeting again at Norwood High School in the cafeteria, 7 to 9 p.m., and we will meet every other week after that for probably 5 sessions total, so that we can refine these ideas. We can prioritize them, say, well, these are the ones that seem to be the most feasible, these are the ones that have the most excitement and energy behind them, these are the ones that we can draw the most resources for. So with that said, I also wanted to introduce Emma, who's going to tell us a little bit about what Community Building Institute does and how they are in the process of collecting data for a data snapshot that will be used in these planning sessions.
Yeah, so thank you, Angela. As Angela said, my name is Emma Shari. I work for the Community Building Institute. We are actually located at Xavier University, so we're a partnership between Xavier and United Way. We have been brought in by Angela and the team to support data work around these different action teams. So we've met a couple times to talk about what existing data is out there, housing data, sort of census-based data that we can digest and put in a usable format for folks to be talking about these various different action items. So we've talked a lot about housing, we've talked about safety, we've talked about assets in the neighborhood. So we will be working alongside the work teams to provide data support and whatever that looks like for them, and giving them the tools to be able to use that to implement their action steps. Is that enough? So that's the basics, that's a start. We approach the work of getting information from what people want to use. We can get all the data in the world, but it's most helpful to have things that people want and can use. So. Question?
Do you have a copy of that?
Yep.
And is it also posted online?
I do. So Leslie's question was it posted online? As of this evening, I don't believe it was, but as of very shortly, it shall be.
So would it be feasible? I don't remember if the post was, could it be attached to where the report out was?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So, and that was on the Woven Oak Facebook page?
Yeah, there's on wovenoak.org, there is a quality of life page, and I will just make sure that this is available there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions about the summary so far?
I'm curious a little bit more about the data aspect that you're going to provide, because I think that having good data sources also will help not just this process, but help council and the city make better decisions about things. So where are you getting the data? How do you compile? What form does it take as output?
So as I said, we want to make it as usable as possible. So I think the primary sources that we'll rely on are American Community Survey, census data, stuff like that. We will primarily be using secondary data sources, so things that are already out there. We may do some field checking of things. So, for example, we've talked about the Montgomery Road corridor. Is it possible to look at vacancies? Is it possible to do those things? I will say that we want to give you things that are useful. Again, so if there's something that you are particularly interested in, I'm happy to take that and see if it's possible. There's a great program called My Sidewalk. We can use My Sidewalk. We have access to that data. That gives you a nicer format for people to look at, nicer charts, graphs, things like that. So we are happy to work with the steering committee and with you all on what would best suit your needs. So if there's specific data points, I'm happy to record them now and look into it and get back to you. We've only talked just one time to start thinking about what those data points are. Really the secondary data sources will be the primary use, though. We aren't going to be creating a bunch of data for those.
That's great. I was more in it for selfish reasons, because I like the more information you can have about our community, I think the better. And so I might follow up with you on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I do want to make a couple of comments on the connection between the work of these action groups and our committee and really all of council. So I think Eric's question is a great example of where this resident-led project is going to generate information that we as council members, also residents, would want to know. So when the committee meeting happens that we're in, we will hear updates. Each group, action group that Angela listed out, I would encourage us to think about, are there other council committees that would like to invite these groups to come? So for instance, there will be an action group led by residents who want to think about economic development. So they will use information that's gathered by CBI, and residents, when they're meeting on those Wednesday nights, will be generating their ideas for the corridor, their ideas for business development. Excuse me. And as those ideas come back to council, that's the feedback loop where we as policymakers can be helping residents better understand there is policy that supports that, or there is not policy that supports that, and here's why. And that gives us an opportunity to collaborate, which was one of the main themes that came up. There are a lot of opportunities through this resident-led process that do not require city dollars, but they do require understanding of what's feasible in the city.
And I did list out 8 focus areas of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats that we identified, but we culled the action teams down to 6, and they will all be meeting at the same time. So on August 29th, everyone gathers first as a group, a large group, and then gets sent off into different parts of the cafeteria to work in specific teams. And we're folding in partnerships and city government into the teams: economic development, community perception, infrastructure, housing, inclusion, and community engagement, because city government and partnerships touch most, if not all, of those subject areas.
So this is a really interesting time because the work of council has been considering a lot of these ideas. And so I want to be real clear that there is a resident-led process that council does not govern. It's very independent. The only intersection I'm aware of is that for a time I served on the steering committee, which my tenure on that steering committee ends tomorrow at 5 p.m. And in large part it's because I wanted to have a more clear role of being a council member who can help the residents who are part of the process engage in our committee, but also other committees, and keep spreading the word. I do want to share Wednesdays, starting the 29th. Do people need to sign up, register? How does that work?
So
Do they just show up?
one can just show up, which is why I'm publicizing it through this meeting. There will also be an opportunity to RSVP if people are so led. I will be sending out through Facebook, the Norwood Strong and various other Norwood-centric Facebook pages will have a link. There will be a Facebook event page and an Eventbrite link that will be active so people can RSVP. And the good thing about having an Eventbrite link is that can populate your calendar, whatever mode you use in your calendar. If you use a Google Calendar, if you use some other way to remind you, then it can be there for you.
And is there anything residents need to do to prepare to come?
What I've seen in my 12 years in Norwood is that people have very strong ideas already. I encourage people to bring that with them, and also a spirit of the spirit of collaboration that we all want to see. It is going to be these will be very action-oriented meetings. There's a beginning, middle, and end of this process. Our goal is to have a full-fledged plan, a resident-led plan that will be rolled out in January of 2019. So by the end of this process, we should identify the action items that we'll be working on and seeking resources for. But we'll also have a full list of here's what we want to see done in this community, and those can be short-term, intermediate, or long-term, up to probably a 10-year span. So, yeah, I think people are practical in this town and understand we won't be able to get to everything right away, and there will be some things that we'll have to take high priority based on what we have as far as ambition and leadership. So another thing people can bring is their willingness to step forward and lead a project. They'll receive plenty of support, even if they've never led a project before. If they raise their hand to say, I want to be involved as a leader in this, we can walk alongside that.
Yeah, so I think that the work that you all are doing is fantastic, and thank you all for being here. I was wondering if you could speak on just the order that these things are in on the back. Is there any rhyme or reason why?
No, it's about how they came up, I think.
Okay, yeah, so it's just kind of random then, basically.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. And then I see that road improvements, it says priority there. So does that mean that this was a pretty big topic for
Yes.
many people?
Yeah.
Was that the biggest topic that, would you say?
I wouldn't say that that's I don't know if that's, I would actually say that in the visioning session, it was interesting to watch because we broke up into teams. I think there were 8 teams total that each worked on that who, what, where, when, why exercise. But when we drafted it up on big pieces of paper and said, okay, let's put these all up so that everybody can see it and reported out those. It was amazing how consistent they were across everybody who was there. And one of the biggest was this idea of community action groups, or kind of like a community council, because we don't have that in Norwood currently. So people wanted a space to be involved more officially, I guess would be the word for it. So that, I think, was consistent across all, but I don't remember if road improvements showed up there across all.
Thank you so much.
I just want to reiterate, thank you. This has been a wonderful process, in my opinion, and I'm really excited for how the work continues to unfold. So next time we meet, look forward to having you back. You're also welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like. But this, yeah,
Can
go
I
ahead.
just add that if you have my contact information, if anybody has questions about data,
Okay.
pass it on.
So I will share with the members of the committee, members of council, how to get a hold of the Community Building Institute, so that if we have any questions about data, we can share those as well. And this would be in support of the project that is resident-led. So we don't want to create a secondary project for CBI, but if we've got questions about the format, we're going to potentially get data in that's already being collected, we can do that. So in terms of our goals, I want to go back to, on the paper you have, I think it's listed as number 3. The neighborhood associations, is that what is number 3?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So when we had this initial conversation, I think it was February, March, maybe April is when we kind of were more discussing like what we'd like to nail down. And neighborhood associations more fully was really saying, hey, how do we help get resident voice involved in decision making? And part of why I wanted to table it was because I think the resident-led action groups that are part of this planning process are doing that work. When you all look at that goal statement, what we had envisioned, aside from finding out what happens from the process, do you think this goal still needs to stand alone?
I think it should stand alone based on the fact that we're starting to really call it resident action groups. So, I mean, we should still have a focus and that we should think about it in relation to this plan and that we make sure that we're following up on that vision so that we're not getting to, once the plan dissipates and is done in 2019, hopefully we're there to encourage the same people who created the plan to work on the implementation. So either way it takes, I think 3 to me is the same as these resident action groups. I think we just want to follow up on that and make sure we're utilizing the resources that have been gathered through this process.
Other thoughts?
I would
Yeah.
agree with Mr. Oro's that just the fact that we just heard from Angela, that was
Can you speak up a little louder?
yeah, the fact that from Angela saying that the community action groups, the resident action groups, it was, from the tables at the visioning session, it was a pretty resounding consistency that people wanted to see more of that. It seems like something like that should stay as well, whatever you would want to call it.
Well, we're discussing, I know I'm a big proponent of that, but I don't want to recreate something. And since there's not currently this committee, I think, serves as the vehicle to kind of connect what's happening in the groups to council. And aside from like creating another entity that holds that, I just want us to discuss and be mindful, how do we stay engaging? So when I listen to your comment, James, I'm thinking, do we want to see each of those groups share here? Do we just want to ask them to share with us what they're doing, like in reports, or what would we want that to look like once the plan is complete? 'Cause I think between the two of your comments, we're saying we'll hear updates on the planning that the action groups are doing, but from then, what?
I mean, I think I don't know that this committee would be the best place for all action groups to report to, because like you said earlier, there's going to be, I know that there's groups touching on parks and infrastructure, and it's different committees, it's my committee, and there's going to be, different groups. I think what we want is to make sure that we're listening to what they've got to say, and I think having them come to the appropriate committees, it just gives what they have to say a better platform and a little bit more power. So But as far as keeping number 3 in here, I think it's fine to keep it in here. It's just if we want as part of this committee to help ensure that those connections get made to other departments and other committees as part of, since this is economic and community engagement, just having that in here as, this committee being the umbrella that helps make those connections, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Mr. Thompson. I think even it could turn out that maybe each of us on the committee ends up being a contact for each of these groups. Like maybe they just have a point person they can come to and kind of let us know what's going on and what they kind of need, and we can report back to you, Leslie, or to the whole committee. And Steve, our audio guy, just so you know, we're getting a little bit of feedback in here. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, that's a lot better. He is on it. But yeah, I mean, so I guess, Leslie, to leave it here or not to leave it here, it just depends. I mean, just because it's on our goals doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, to me, doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be the ones that are leading it. We're just we still want to make sure we keep our eyes on it, watching it happen. But if you have a place for it that you would rather it be, or if there's something else, I'm definitely open to that as well, to keep us focused on all the other important work that we have on our plate. So.
I don't know how much I have to add to that. Those are great points. I mean, I don't have much to add to that. Sorry.
I think that the priority for me is the communication is sustained. I don't think I ever imagined this goal being something that happens here, just with us. And so I like both ideas. Yes, we want to be mindful that the plans get acted on, and yes, we might think about making sure those action groups know, for instance, like there's an infrastructure action group, making sure they know who's on that infrastructure committee of council. Is that something, I mean, they're going to meet on the 29th. We could easily just make sure there's a listing of the standing committees and the contact information for the chair that's a part of that day.
Sure.
To keep that going. And then I would suggest for the other committee chairs, and maybe if we think this is a good idea, we could put this in our report out, that the committee chairs all reach out and let those other groups know if they're welcome at those committee meetings too, just to make sure there's not too many, to try and limit any duplicity, especially if there's going to be, and I think there will be some in the research process, like figuring out, is this plan feasible? Like, we don't need abundance of calls to the same department, that kind of thing. Does it sound like we're reaching consensus on that? It can remain a goal, and we're seeing the goal kind of operationalized through the action groups, which was one of the main things that came out of the report back visioning session.
I think so.
Okay. All right. Now I'll make sure I put that in our report. How do folks feel about the specific action of making sure the standing committees and the contact information for the chairs of the committees is available on the 29th?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'd like to go back to the top of the list for our Welcome to Norwood. This has been really an interesting concept to me, and I have some thoughts that I guess I wrote down at a previous meeting and just kind of want to go back to and see if we think these are still good ideas to act on, and if so, then I'd like to try and make some assignments so that we'll know what to anticipate before we meet again. So our goal was really looking at, well, at least the way we wrote it down, was to collaborate with the web consultants to update the website and seek out business sponsorship for tangible products. Our next steps were to include gaining feedback from residents, drafting content for some type of a welcome book, and confirming sponsorship. And so we were hopeful to all have updates the following month. I think these are from May. What do we think about that at this point in time?
I have a couple thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I just went to a community and we were just visiting and getting kind of a tour of it, and they had these bags already set up, but it looked at very minimal, almost to no expense from the city. So a lot of these, all of the items were sponsored by the businesses. And really, it's just like merchandise from the business or something that promotes the business. So you could have, really, there was a couple key items that were there. The bag. So it could say, welcome to Norwood, and be a bag, but also on the other side, have a logo of whatever the community is. And these were just in like the bags that you get like at the grocery store, like at Aldi's, or more of the fabric bags that you use instead of the plastic bags. That's kind of the format it took. And then you just had businesses throw in their different things that represented their business. An easy one was a water bottle that just had a wrap that showed what the business was. We could figure out maps. They could have coupons from different ones. We could have city information in the bag, potentially a shirt that said something about Norwood, but also said something about the business. Magnets that you put on there, keychains, candy, bumper stickers. So really all of these were items that were donated or in effect part of the marketing budget for businesses in Norwood. So it kind of just fills the basket, and then you have or the bag, and you have them, and they're there for when people come in. So it was a pretty easy way to do it.
What is that for?
It's just a bag instead of when someone moves into Norwood or when a new business moves into, yes, just something to recognize a new individual in the community. So I thought it was a really easy and effective way to do it, and it looked very inexpensive in terms of, it was a township of their expenditures.
So as I recall, we looked at a bag from, I believe, the city of Wyoming, and we were all in agreement that sponsorship seemed like a good way to go. We thought maybe we would look at reaching out to businesses, and I'm wondering if instead of an individual effort, how we might feel about our committee sending a letter to the chamber and asking them to invite their members to support this concept.
It's a good idea.
I'm seeing a head nod.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, then I will write down, draft a letter to the Norwood Chamber, and I'll circulate it to the committee, make sure we're agreed, we can sign off and get it there. And is everyone liking that general concept as Greg described? Do you recall seeing that kit that we had here?
Yes.
I know we talked about, at least I recall writing down, we talked about having walking paths. That was something that they did in Wyoming. We thought was a good idea, maybe reaching out to the Historical Society in terms of non-business entities that might want to participate as well. All right, I will own that action step.
Just a question about that, Leslie. So what are we wanting at this point, the individual businesses to do? Or are we asking the chamber if they might actually kind of take up the effort of kind of organizing the sponsorships or what have you? Or are we more, like who do we want them to donate money to or donate things to? Or that's...
So as I listened, I didn't hear about donating. I heard if a company already has marketing dollars set aside, would they want to designate marketing dollars to make something or take part of whatever they're already making to go into a bag?
That's fine, yeah, and that's fine. So it's more about just the extra items. Would there be any extra fees or anything generated from that so that we can pay for like the maps or some of the other stuff that...
So I think it's also possible to ask a business if they would do that. So as an example, years ago when I worked at Xavier, there was a company that we utilized to print posters. The same company would often provide calendars for the year. It was a way for them to demonstrate their print work and get their contact information in businesses, households, etc. So I think we might be more successful if the ask to businesses is, would you be willing to welcome people to Norwood and let them know you are here by creating an item that is branded that demonstrates what you offer. So we would receive what they're willing to promote, and that would create the context. We could make it clear there are specific opportunities, like, do you want to brand the bag and manage the cost of that? If we feel like nope, that bag has to have the city seal, then we might think about that. And so I will start the draft of the letter, and then we can circulate it and think about, is there something we want to call out in terms of sponsorship, does this or that, or however. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, I won't push send until we look at the wordsmithing and agree on it.
And then we can always start simple with what we have.
Yes.
And this bag was not as fancy as the Wyoming bag that
Yeah.
looked a little more expensive per bag. So I think that could be helpful.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought about when we were talking about it was youth organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Some of their sign-up things for soccer or for the baseball or anything like that, having that in there so they know immediately what to sign their kids up for, and it could be helpful.
And that might be something where, I mean, once all this stuff is identified, once these promotional items are identified, they'll need to be gathered. And once the promotional items are identified, they'll need to be gathered and put in a bag. And so we may have opportunity to engage a group that would want to own that part of the project too. So I think we're agreed. Reaching out to the chamber is a good first step. I'll go ahead and draft something and get it out to the members of committee, and we can report that out. So I'll try and turn that around before our first meeting in August, so we can report that out and send that out.
Two things.
Yeah.
Mr. War said that we work with what we have. Do we have something already? Do we have bags? Or
No, I mean, just when it's collected.
Okay,
Let's say if we
okay.
have a bag and it just has the sponsored stuff and we don't have the printed material yet, we still have the bags, and then we add items as time goes on. If you think about it, it should be whether you had 200 of these to start with or 300, once you have them collected. And we've had things like this in other cities. They have like a little chocolate walk, and they just have chocolates that they have or whatever. So it's easy for them a business to get small items that they may already have around, simple pens or anything, or small promotional items that kind of fill the bag. And then we can work on filling our parts if we do get sponsorships or get some funds to print material.
Sure.
So
Thanks.
that, don't let the printed material that we don't have about city information hold it up. You can still get out a bag even if it's not perfect, and keep building momentum.
Absolutely. Our friend here wanted to say something. Is there something
I
you need to say?
apologize, I didn't see you.
With the bag, I would just be careful not to bring it out because we don't want them to see it as another tax. We ask them to pay for it, we want to ask them for donations or something like that. We don't want to ask them to fees. I think that's terrible. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. You are a business owner. Appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, typically these are on a volunteer basis. Do you want to do it? Not that you have to do it, so that they're throwing in a business card or something like that to do it. It's a voluntary.
And then just to follow up kind of on the bags too, I mean, I'm hoping that they at least will contain, and I mean, I'll help, I can almost write this if I have to, but at least contain some basic information about, like, just garbage schedule, the garbage holidays, how the LEAF program works. You gotta have it, the brown bags, you can get them free at the health department, just various like little factoid type information that, and we can print those on office paper. I mean, it's like, they don't have to be professionally printed, they don't have to be like, all glossy, but I do hope that no matter what we do, that we can ensure that gets at least in the bag some of that basic information that as a resident you may not know when you first.
All the phone numbers and city numbers and stuff that you might want to have.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's a great point. And even stuff at the senior center. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know if that's rare, but it's the services, the kind of programs that they have there. At least they're not really offered in the community that I used to live in. So it's kind of nice that we have them, and love to promote stuff like that out there.
So that's a great segue, unless there's another comment. We talked with this welcome experience about making it tangible, recognizing that the approach we just talked about would require willingness from businesses. The other approach we talked about was being able to draft something that goes on our website, so that even if we didn't have the opportunity to hand somebody something, we could direct them to a website that exists, that has some of this to Mr. Bonzal's point, basic city information. So is somebody interested in working from the draft that Greg has? I think it was the welcome home materials, to start drafting new language that we could provide to our website consultants. And I think it could include what you just shared.
Yeah, that's fine. I can take that up and start working on that.
Okay. And then whatever that looks like, it could be for print or for online.
I can take care of how that looks.
I was gonna say, yes,
Yeah,
that actually would be
that'd be cool.
fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, but if you can pull the content, I can take care of the look and feel.
Cool.
Okay. That's great. And
But then I'm going to try to meet with the website developer guy, and I think we were going to try
I was
to.
gonna say, I've got their contact information now, so
Okay.
we can get that set up.
Yeah.
And see what's possible. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll try to come to.
I'll definitely do that.
okay. The only other thing I want to say about this action item is that for August, I guess we've had 3 markets already. So for the summer 18 Norwood Farmers Market season, I've been helping coordinate a booth, a table, for the purpose of welcoming people. And this last weekend, we made these little signs. They say, "What's happening, Norwood?" And we were able to have flyers. We promoted the Shakespeare in the Park. We promoted the month before, Coney Day. And people are stopping by. They're picking up materials. And so I wanted to share with you all and with the public, that's another space where this basic information could go. It's also a space where I want to invite organizations that are here in Norwood. If you've got flyers and you want to have some presence personally or with your paper, please consider getting that information to the Clerk of Council's office prior to the next market. We've got 2 more, August and September, and I offer that and welcome other people to help be a part of making that booth happen, because it's been working. New residents who have just moved here, have houses under contract. Just this last weekend, met a couple. They said, "We have a house under contract here in Norwood, and we just wanted to come check out the neighborhood." And so that was a great time for them. They had questions, and I talked to them. I connected them to Mr. Bonsall. The next day or 2, connected them to some other folks in the city. So they were able to find out some more information, work through some challenges that they had perceived, and really have a good welcome to Norwood. So I'm excited that we have a great farmers market here. I'm excited that there is an openness to have such a booth there. And so as you're out and about, I would encourage you as council members, but also the general public, come check out the booth. And if you have information that you'd like to share there, you can get it here to City Hall, the Clerk of Council's office, or you can reach out to me directly. Again, my email address is lstevenson@norwood-ohio.com. Okay, so I think we have just run through 3 of our 5 goals. We have 2 remaining, and just want to review kind of where we left off. So back in May, under small business in Norwood, we spent some time kind of reflecting on the tool we learned about from LIST, which was Kiva. It was crowdsourcing for small loans. And we talked a little bit about resources to support business owners here, to attract small businesses, and we talked a little bit about the example from Pleasant Ridge of having an entertainment district. So what I can share is, because of the work that's happened with the quality of life visioning process and the themes that have risen up, there have been some conversations that are not public yet, but it's becoming more clear what kind of support will be available for businesses here. And so as soon as that information is made public, we will be able to share out what are some project-based things like Community Building Institute supporting the project that are happening versus what are some things that are happening for the city of Norwood that are not project related but are really about resources available to support small businesses. Anybody have any questions or thoughts about how that was initially designed, that goal? Nope. No?
I
Yeah?
just have a quick question.
Mhm.
You had mentioned the Community Entertainment District.
Can't hear ya.
You mentioned the Community Entertainment District
Yes.
in the past. Has there been any additional understanding or leanings towards where that might go, or if that might still be a part of the conversation?
So when I spoke with Amber David, she was the business specialist who was here with us and works for LISC. LISC has tools available that are beyond small business. And so when I spoke with her, she made it known that they do have resources and could support that type of application. However, because LISC is a funder for the planning process that's taking shape, a lot of their resources are being directed at projects that have surfaced through resident activity. So that is the activity that's happening right now, where I said some things are project-based. There is a planning project going on that they're supporting. It doesn't mean their other resources aren't available, but because the way we wrote it, our goal really was to focus on the priority is to attract and retain businesses that can use vacancies, working along doing that infill work on Montgomery Road. That's the same goal and vision of the resident groups right now. So it's not that it's not being worked on. I would say it's in a time-bound project right now. And so beyond that, I don't know what'll surface. It'll kind of depend, not that it will depend, it will be subsequent to what gets developed in the planning process. Is that helpful?
It does help, yep.
From my understanding of it, for the entertainment district, there's certain restrictions in how you establish it. So I think I'll do a little more research on exactly what's involved. But I think it's a certain amount of distance, and then I thought there was a certain amount of liquor license or something like that were required within that distance. Somehow 4 comes up into my head, so we have to find an area that we're trying to encourage this entertainment district, and I think the name of it gets people a little worried too sometimes, but it's just to give flexibility so that every place that you serve alcohol doesn't need a fence around it. It is one of the nice requirements, so you have a little bit more flexibility there, and then there's certain like incentives for businesses to come there. So I think we need to check a little bit on it and then see where there's 4 liquor license within a certain area, whether that's south near Xavier and near Bettas and all of that, so, and how far that stretches. So there's just definitely certain requirements.
Yeah, and I'd be curious if an entertainment district can cross like a city border. So could it be stretched from, all the way down to Montgomery and Dana, or even slightly up to Dana's, what have you. Could be an opportunity just for partnership there to create one cohesive area. But if it's not there, just let us know as well.
And same for the goals of the small business. I do think you're right, like we need a collaboration between like the Community Building Institute, Xavier, potentially the Chamber, as we discussed, and other groups to come up. So we're not rewriting this, but come up with a stronger group. And inventory was one that was discussed, both looking at buildings that we want to rehab, and then also figuring out buildings that are underserved or underserving the areas. So that's what the trouble with Montgomery Road is, I think, is that you've got some neat historic buildings that are worked in there, but then you have almost like a single-family house or mostly a parking lot mixed into there. So figuring out what that inventory is and what buildings you want to try to give tax breaks or something like that to rehab, and then what areas we want to try to figure out almost need to be assembled parcels or something like that to get a larger scale development. in that area.
Yeah.
I think that would be decent or interesting to figure out what those are. Hey, we just need increased density. I think you just, so you don't have areas that have a row of buildings, then all of a sudden it kind of drops off in Montgomery. Then there's a whole dense section, and I think that's what's hurting us on our walkability from Montgomery Road.
Thank you. Any other comments on small business in Norwood? Okay. So, Greg, you're going to research more what the district calls for and whether or not it can cross jurisdictions?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so I think our last area on here was community engagement. So, increasing transparency about projects and upcoming changes, and looking to gain routine updates on projects, inviting developers, business owners to share. Any thoughts? Well, actually, let me say this. So we have begun a conversation in our last meeting with a company, and I just want to share that that conversation is no longer a public conversation. So we're not going to be revisiting it in our committee meeting, and that's okay. I also want to share that this community engagement in Norwood, at least in my mind's eye, is where we might be introducing of our own accord new ideas or new business. Not that it has to specifically fall up under this, but if there are things you're hearing and want to be sharing out, this would be one space to do that. But what do we think about how we're approaching this goal at this point? Anything stand out? You're like, yep, we need to be checking on this, or how about that? So I do have a couple of things to share. One is I received an email yesterday from a resident, and essentially it's great news that requires us to think about some things differently. So there's an opportunity to revisit conversation about murals. It's my understanding that there is an organization that would like to put a mural in Norwood. And right now, I don't think that's okay. There was, early this year, an address to the Board of Zoning Appeals that had to do with a mural. And I remember attending the meeting, and I think that the BZA at the time, if I'm recalling, I think this was February, was interested in getting some more support, either from council or from the administration, to define what is a mural and how is it feasible to have murals in Norwood that is not in violation of current code. So I would like for us to consider, is this something that falls under community engagement? Is this something that we report out and it goes into another committee? What might be our opportunities around the request to have a mural?
I think it's probably this committee. I also would encourage us to maybe invite Artworks to come to a committee. They've already solved all these problems with Cincinnati. I'm sure that they have some of the similar zoning issues when they first started around advertisements and large scale murals on the sides of buildings. And so I think rather than us try to reinvent the wheel, I'd be really interested in knowing it's a well-respected organization that's right in their backyard, and I'd be interested in seeing if they'd be willing to help or inform our process a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with Mr. Thompson there. I also think that, well, just thinking about the murals themselves, let's just think about if somebody wants to put a mural up now, what would they have to do? And it seems like the way that the Lydia's House people did with the mural at Carter and Mills, it seems like that might be an appropriate path. before you do the mural next time, but an appropriate path to maybe get approval right now based on our current zoning code. So somebody can draft up what the mural wants to look like, and we'll have to talk to the building department to make sure the process is in play to be able to do that. I'm sure it is because somebody just went through it, but to allow the BZA.
Can you clarify? Somebody just went through what process?
Oh, so the Lydia's House people just went through the process at Carter Mills for those murals at the old house, those doorways. They had to do some kind of appeal that went to the BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then they were able to approve it. And from my understanding, Tanya Cook was there. She kind of gave me the report out from what happened. From my understanding, they were very, very supportive of it. And but it's not their place as a BZA. They just make decisions based on what our current zoning code says. So yes, no, and does it fit to the neighborhood, whatever the things are defined in our current zoning code, they only use that criteria. So they themselves can't change the mural stuff, which I know that you weren't suggesting that, but so they do definitely have to partner with other people to do that. And so if we're looking for, well, I would just say if there's somebody that wants to do a mural, I would encourage them, knowing how positive the BZA was on this one, I would highly encourage them to at least look at going through that process of just paying the $70 fee or $80 fee to have the BZA review it. But we should, in the future though, we do need to change something so that we can be more flexible with these murals and at least allow the chance to have them, and at least so it looks like they're more accessible. You can't rely on the BZA, whoever's on in the future, to always be there to support it. This group seems really supportive and really well run, but you just never know. So yeah, I do. It's true. I do agree with that, though, that we probably should look at it. And Greg might actually have some ideas of who.
Yeah, I've been researching this for quite a while, and from what I've seen, I think I could be wrong on it, but City of Cincinnati is just up to the discretion of like the building commissioner or the building department. I thought from what I read. So what I've also noticed and seen when you discuss murals is the lawsuits. So there is lawsuits, like something versus the city of whatever for not allowing a mural in a certain area. So what I think I finally decided that is the legal aspect of it is I think you can decide what zones potentially you want to allow murals in. And then the definition is pretty easy. That just defines a mural. It's a form of artwork. It's not a sign per se. So that part's easy. It's the regulation of that. And then you have to just say that if it is defined as a mural, it is allowed up to some certain size in these zoning districts. And that's really regardless of the content. Like it could be a paint bucket for a paint store, but is in the form of art. Or a flower on a florist area. Like you can't use that subjective there. So once you allow it, you allow it. I think there has been some precedent to say that a city can regulate aesthetics for the basis of aesthetics, so that's possible, I think, potentially, but you just have to watch like that you're not doing it based on content. So another way would be to potentially allow more artistic expression in the M2 district, or the M1, like the industrial district, or in the general business district, but maybe not in the office district here or the central business district. So it might be interesting to allow a little bit more freedom of expression in areas that we feel that would be appropriate, but areas that we want to regulate further or make sure that residential, obviously, and some of our more, I don't want to say conservative, but our more traditional downtown areas or traditional areas that we don't want so much activity going on. So, I mean, because we're having other businesses that are coming in that really want to potentially have a little bit more expression through what they do and through their art, and right now we designate that as signs. And it might be neat to have, they're potentially looking in the M2 district to have the M2 district be a little bit, that's the heavy manufacturing, allow a little bit more interesting things to go on there. Maybe allow big signs to be in the heavy manufacturing signs, that you could have neat sort of signs, you have neat artwork or whatever. Just it could end up being Highland is what I'm thinking of. Instead of regulating Highland you know, you have to have it go review, but allow just more things that are way out of the box than you'd necessarily consider, that go with the distillery, that go with the recycling plant, and all of that stuff. Like recycled art was brought up as if it was tastefully done instead of the recycling, instead of trying to fight it, you know, embrace it if it's done properly.
Okay.
So by district is another potential way to do it.
So I've heard several ideas. I've heard, yeah, let's keep this conversation going in this committee. Consider bringing in Artworks to talk about how they've resolved challenges in Cincinnati. Thinking about how we might support the decision-making process BZA is responsible for by clarifying murals and thinking about what we could do or recommend to create guidelines, whether that's defining it and deciding where they could go. Any other thoughts?
I can just give you a my opinion, which is I really enjoy the murals, like personally, and as a young kid, I caught a bus in front of the community center now on Carter Avenue in front of the community center, and you know, I watched as that area right there at Carter and Mills and the surrounding areas it was real beautiful when I was a child. I caught a bus there. I used to walk across Norwood, so I watched that area kind of progressively, I don't know, get worse as far as, you know, but and then you know, the church went out years ago. There used to be the big Catholic church, and then recent years the things that's happening in that area is really I really enjoyed the things that are happening. When the murals went up, I really enjoyed that. It really brightened the neighborhood. So I would love the more artistic expression in certain areas, and definitely would be in favor in it. I really think it helped that area. I really enjoyed it. You know, as somebody that grew up as a youngster right in that area, watched it kind of decline, and then I see the renaissance that's going on, and I'm really happy that that's happening. So definitely in support of that. So in other areas of the city, I definitely would love to see that happen.
Why don't, for next meeting, why don't I bring, if we arrange for Artworks to come, even if they're going to come here, I can bring specific language. I'll bring a definition. I'll bring what districts we could potentially allow it in, and then requirements of what we, and that way we can at least present it to them. We can all look at it. They could say, oh, here's a pitfall or whatever. Have the law department look at it and at least get the discussion. So we have something to redline. Yeah. At least to take a look at.
I think that would be wonderful, and I will reach out to Artworks.
Because we do need to solve this one way, I think, or the other.
Yep. I didn't attend that meeting, but wasn't they again? Did someone come and want a mural and then they turned them down? I saw that meeting, and that was against that, wasn't that?
Well, so is it okay if I?
Please.
Yeah. So just our sign code, you know, there's some controversy, I guess, on the definition. Well, Jerry Stoker is very sure of what the definition is, but it's okay. So basically, it's not allowed, and so in order, the city, I mean, the people went ahead and put the mural up. They didn't know if it was allowed or not. They just made it because they wanted to put some art out there and not just, you know, plyboard on the side of the building. And so they then, once the city told them, hey, somebody complained, it's not allowed. You know, it's one person that said, oh my gosh. Anyways, the people applied for some kind of BZA exemption, and the Board of Zoning Appeals, from my understanding, they were completely, almost 100% just in like complimentary of the goal that they are trying to do and what they're trying to do kind of in the neighborhood with the mural, and that, you know, sometimes there's just some bureaucracy that kind of gets in the way, and so they were very supportive. So I just want to, you know, make sure that I really emphasize that the Board of Zoning Appeals, they were very, very supportive of it. They didn't have any issues with it. It's just, and it wasn't even their, it's not even their hands that were tied when it comes to them having to go there. I mean, they didn't force anybody to go there, but once it came to the BZA, they took action and allowed it to happen, so.
Thank you.
Stuff, yeah.
Any other thoughts on our goals? Or any new thoughts? New business? Okay. I think we're all clear. As typical, I've typed up our notes, so I will share these out. I'll also be sharing out a draft of a letter that will go to the chamber, and would love your feedback before our next regular meeting. I'd like to be able to report both out at that time. And when I send out notes, I'll have the other action steps that we've talked about here today as well. And I just want to say thank you. It's been consistently enjoyable having this committee meeting with you all. See you next time.
Thank you.